Welcome to today's Explainer. Go ahead and take your seats. Today, we're doing a masterclass on ultimate personal liberation, and we're framing it through a dark, highly philosophical, and honestly gripping grim-dark Gothic fable. We are diving deep into the philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche, using this powerful little story about a heroic quest for enlightenment. Picture this. You set out on a journey where every single comforting illusion is just stripped away, leaving absolutely nothing but the raw, unvarnished truth of existence. That is exactly the path we're walking today.
So, I want you to ask yourselves the ultimate core philosophical dilemma of human existence. Would you choose a beautiful lie or the barren truth? Seriously, hold on to this question as we go through today's lesson. Look, we all have our own sacred maps, those comforting dogmas, the stories, and the beliefs that make the world feel safe and orderly. But what actually happens when reality refuses to match those maps? Do you cling to the gilded illusion, or do you step out into the terrifying unknown?
Okay, let's dive into part one. The Fall of Golden Maps, the Gilded Betrayal.
Imagine an old cartographer. He's labored for 40 years in the perfectly safe, deeply comforting paradise of the gilded city of Cherubim. His entire life's work is illuminating charts, meticulously etching these gorgeous visions of paradise in pure gold leaf, aligning perfectly with the sacred drawings of his ancestors. But then, on a completely cloudless autumn evening, everything shatters. He climbs up to his observatory and discovers a horrifying truth. The stars are refusing to align with his sacred maps. The actual light of the heavens is betraying the beauty of his laws. At first, he panics. He tries to hide this crack in his worldview by painting even more ornate paradises, hoping he can just smother the accuracy with the sheer weight of beauty. But it fails. He realizes the universe is utterly, completely indifferent to human longing. So, in this massive, radical act, he throws his life's work right into the furnace and walks out through the eastern gate, leaving that gilded city for a terrifying, barren wasteland of bone-white dust.
Class, what we're looking at here brilliantly illustrates the collapse of a concept known as teleology. Now, teleology is basically the belief that the universe has this inherent design, a purpose, or some ultimate goal. By throwing his maps into the furnace, our cartographer is living through the death of comforting dogmas. This is the proverbial death of God, the total failure of the ideal. It represents that terrifying transition into nihilism, where the universe is finally exposed as entirely indifferent to our desires. The stars simply do not care about our golden maps.
Moving right along to part 2, Surgery on the Soul. Enter our surgical hermit.
So now our cartographer is this surgical hermit, wandering around the barren wasteland in the limestone dust. But he isn't alone. He's kneeling there, using a jagged quill to perform this meticulous, excruciating surgery upon the human soul, when he's suddenly interrupted. Out of the heat haze, a shadow appears. The shadow hisses at him. It mocks the man for his cold isolation, challenging him to justify his solitude and interrogating him for throwing away the shelter of those old comforting fictions. Imagine the shadow leaning in, whispering with this rasping laugh. Do you not tremble, hermit, to cut away the holy moss that has shielded your kind from the winter of reality? That shadow represents our own innate fear of the cold, hard truth. It's literally begging the wanderer to go back to the warmth of the illusion.
Well, our wanderer isn't having it. He replies that he's seeking the unadorned truth, and he's using the ultimate weapon to find it, philology. When we analyze this, we see it perfectly mirrors Nietzsche's own real-world background as a classical philologist. The hermit acts as a master text critic. He holds those old holy scripts up to a dying light, not to worship them, but to expose them. He uses the actual history of language to reveal that these so-called sacred truths are, in reality, just human inventions. They're scribal errors and pious interpolations, forged by anxious human hands over thousands and thousands of years.
Which brings us to part 3, Scraping Away Moral Paint. Let's talk about good and evil.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how he approaches these heavy, ancient words, good and evil, while standing beneath a relentless sun. He tackles them using Nietzsche's genealogical method. Think of him like an art restorer. He finds these concepts reeking with the stench of historical accidents, and he just absolutely refuses to accept them as divine decrees. Instead, step 1, he seizes them. Step 2, he literally scrapes away the layers of cheap moral paint. And step 3, he uncovers this forgotten, bloody historical vitality that predated the priests. He reveals that our values aren't handed down from the heavens. They are the messy, violent products of human struggle and human psychology.
Of course, the shadow is still hovering around, trying to undermine this profound work. It whispers this desperate challenge to the wanderer's process. Is it not madness to claim that what the meek call sacred is merely the revenge of those too weak to conquer fear? The shadow is absolutely terrified by the implication here, that divine morality is really just a historical accident born out of weakness and revenge.
All right, part 4. Turning chains into beautiful ornaments, getting mastery over thought.
This is where the Wanderer has this incredible breakthrough. He answers the shadow, but not with fear. He answers with an overwhelming sense of mastery. He explains that the very words that once commanded and controlled him, they're now merely historical artifacts. Because he understands their history, they become curious, small, and entirely explicable. Think about how empowering that is. By mastering the vocabulary of his own thoughts, he explains how he takes the unexamined chains that used to bind his mind, breaks them apart, and wears them as beautiful ornaments. He has quite literally purchased the deed to his own intellect. How amazing is that?
So the crucial point is, this perfectly defines the sovereign individual's will to power. This concept gets misunderstood all the time as a desire to subjugate others, but it is actually about heroic self-mastery. It's about artistic creation, not political tyranny. The traveler stops reacting to the old, broken laws. Instead, he steps right up to the blank vellum of existence and begins actively writing his own values. He's no longer a follower, he is a creator.
And finally, part 5, the shadowless noon zenith.
So, the Wanderer has dismantled the maps, exposed the texts, and mastered his own mind, and now the clock strikes noon. The vertical sun blazes down, consuming all the artificial gloom. In Nietzschean philosophy, especially in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, noon represents the moment of highest, sharpest clarity. There are no shadows left to hide in. All illusions are utterly destroyed. The traveler is left standing there in total, unflinching exposure to reality. It's a moment that would absolutely break a weaker person.
In this blinding light, the shadow literally cannot survive. It whimpers and withers away under that vertical sun. But right before it vanishes completely, it asks one final desperate question. Did you not miss the twilight, where your limits were still whispered by the ghosts? It's a sad little plea for the comfort of the old boundaries, the safety of being told what you can and cannot do by the ghosts of the past.
But our wanderer? He's not an exile fleeing a lost paradise anymore. He stands tall, right at the zenith, and roars his triumphant answer back. I do not miss the dark, for I have embraced amor fati, the joyous love of my fate exactly as it is. This is it. This is the ultimate declaration of radical self-acceptance and true personal freedom. He is completely transformed from a lost traveler into a sovereign individual.
Amor fati, literally, the love of one's fate. He doesn't just put up with the barren truth, he radically accepts it. That bone-white dust, it's no longer a punishment to him. It is an unmapped dawn. It's the necessary canvas for his own creative power. Standing there as the sole architect of his own purpose, his will to power writes the words, becoming and mastery onto the horizon.
Which brings us to the end of today's explainer, and quite frankly, back to you. Are you ready to stand in that shadowless zenith? Are you ready to examine your own unexamined chains, scrape away the moral paint, and embrace amor fati? The journey to personal liberation isn't about finding some new golden map. It's about having the courage to become the sole architect of your own purpose in the brilliant, unsparing light of noon. Class is dismissed for today, but I challenge you to carry this question with you long after this screen fades to black.